My mother wasn't the type to make things up, but in the summer of 1976, she told us she nursed a Bigfoot and her baby in our barn. And I swear, I believe every word she said. It was the summer of 1976. We lived on a small farm near the Washington-Oregon border. Nothing fancy. Just a few goats, some chickens, and a red barn that had seen better days. My mum was a tough woman. She'd lost my dad the year before in a logging accident and never talked much about it. She didn't complain, she didn't cry in front of us. She just got up each morning, fed the animals, and kept the place running. That summer, my younger sister and I had been sent to stay with our grandma down in Eugene. I was 16 and my sister was 9. I think Mum needed the time to herself, though she never said it out loud. The house was old but solid. We had a rotary phone, a wood stove, and a radio that ran off batteries. There wasn't electricity in the barn, never had been. At night, the only light out there came from a kerosene lantern or the moon. Mum wasn't the type to scare easy. She grew up in the same woods, same hills, same kind of life. She could gut a fish, fix a fence, and shoot a coyote without blinking, though she never did it for sport. She didn't like waste. She didn't like drama. And she sure didn't like nonsense. So when she told me, years later, that she'd nursed a Bigfoot and her baby in our barn that summer, I listened, because my mum didn't tell stories. And if she said it happened, then it did. It started with the animals. The chickens refused to settle at night. They paced and clucked nervously until sunrise. Mum tried covering their coop with extra cloth, thinking it was raccoons or a fox, but nothing changed. Then the goats began acting strange. They wouldn't go near the barn after dark. She had to drag them to the pen, and even then they bolted back to the house if she turned her back. At first she thought it might just be a passing predator, maybe a cougar. But she wasn't hearing the usual sounds, no yowls, no howls, no growling. Just silence. And then odd noises she couldn't place. She started noticing food going missing. A whole crate of apples vanished one morning. Another day, a 25-pound sack of oats was gone. No drag marks, no spills, just missing. She thought maybe she was forgetful. But then she noticed the barn door. She always latched it shut at night. One morning, it was wide open. Another morning, it was just barely swinging, like someone had slipped out before dawn. She checked for signs of break-in. No scratches, no forced entry, but that's when she saw them. Massive footprints, deep, wide, and human-shaped, but far too large. They were in the soft earth by the garden, leading toward the edge of the woods. Not bare prints, not boots, bare feet, 5 toes. That night, she sat up late with the radio low. Around midnight, she heard a heavy breathing sound, not far from the back of the house, and something like a low cough, rough and wet, echoing faintly from the barn. She got her lantern, walked out, but found nothing, just the usual shadows and silence. Over the next few days, signs kept coming. Claw marks on the feed barrels, handprints in the dust that were too big to be hers, a musky smell that lingered near the barn door. She didn't tell anyone, not the neighbors, not her sister on the phone. She just kept quiet. Mum always said people in the country are quick to judge, and even quicker to call you crazy. So she kept it to herself. It was just before sunrise when Mum heard the sound. She was pouring coffee when it came. A strange, wet, crying sound coming from the barn. Not an animal. Not a child. Something in between. She grabbed the lantern, slipped on her boots, and headed out the back door. The barn was still latched, just like she left it the night before. She slid the bolt back slowly, opened the door, and stepped inside. It was quiet for a second. Then the crying started again, low, raspy, and struggling. She followed the sound to the far end of the barn, behind the hay bales. That's when she saw them. A massive shape was slumped in the corner, half covered in straw. Fur-covered, about 8 feet tall, with long arms and matted brown hair. One leg was stretched out, and blood had soaked through the fur around the thigh. The smell was strong, like wet earth and old leaves. Beside her lay a much smaller figure, no more than 2 feet tall, also covered in fine brown hair, but softer looking. The infant was curled into the larger creature's side, shaking and crying. The mother wasn't moving, breathing, but barely. Mum didn't run, didn't scream. She said it just kicked in, that old training from the war. She had worked in field hospitals. She knew shock when she saw it. She went back to the house, grabbed her first aid kit, and returned. She cleaned the wound with warm water and carbolic, packed it with gauze, stitched it up as best she could. The creature twitched once, but didn't wake. She covered them both with a horse blanket and left water in a bucket nearby. For the next 2 days, the mother didn't stir. But the infant kept crying. It was weak, hungry, and fading fast. Mum had just stopped nursing a few years earlier, but still knew how to care for babies. She boiled goat's milk, let it cool, and poured it into one of my old baby bottles she'd kept in a drawer. She slipped into the barn, sat on a bale, and waited. The baby crawled to her, cautious but desperate. It took the bottle. That was the moment Mum said she knew. Whatever they weren't just animals. She kept them hidden. Didn't tell a soul. Not the neighbors, not her church friend, not even us, her own kids. She locked the barn tight and prayed no one came snooping. By the 3rd day, the mother began to stir. At first it was just a twitch of her hand. Then her eyes opened, dark, watchful, and alert. She didn't growl, didn't make a sound. She just watched Mum carefully. Mum said it wasn't fear in her eyes, more like caution, like she was trying to figure out if Mum was a threat or not. Mum kept her distance. She brought more water. A pan of warmed oats mixed with goat's milk, a fresh cloth for the baby. She left the items nearby, then stepped back and waited. The mother didn't touch anything that first day, but she didn't leave either. By the next morning she was sitting upright, holding the infant close. She nursed it briefly but seemed weak. The baby cried again, clearly still hungry. Mum left the bottle on the hay and backed out slowly. That evening it was empty. By day 5 things changed. The mother didn't flinch when Mum stepped into the barn. She didn't rise or snarl, just watched quietly. Mum offered the bottle directly. The mother looked at her hand, then at the baby, and let it take the bottle. From then on, a rhythm formed. Mum would step in each morning and each night. She'd clean the water bucket, leave food, check the wound, which was healing well. Sometimes she'd sit on a hay bale, humming old songs from when we were babies. The baby seemed to like it. It would tilt its head, sometimes sway a little, like it recognized the sound. The mother never made a threatening move, never came closer than needed, but she never left either. At night, Mum said she felt eyes on her from the trees. Not just one pair, more. Watching, waiting, like family members standing guard. She never saw them clearly, just vague shapes between the branches. She believed the mother had been separated during a storm or fell while carrying the baby. Injured and alone, she'd taken shelter in the barn. The infant got stronger by the day. It crawled more, reached for things, made quiet clicking sounds. It even smiled, once. Just a flicker, but real. And through it all, they never spoke, not in words, but something passed between them. Understanding. It was a quiet afternoon when the knock came at the door. Mum opened it to find a state wildlife officer standing on the porch. He was polite, clipboard in hand, and explained there had been reports of a large bear roaming the area. A few folks up the road had seen something big moving through the trees. He was checking with nearby homes. He asked if Mum had noticed anything strange. She kept her voice steady and told him no. Just the usual raccoons and deer, maybe the odd coyote, nothing bigger than that. He nodded, jotted a few things down, and thanked her for her time. As he walked back to his truck, she stood there on the porch, heart pounding. She didn't go out to the barn until after dark. When she finally opened the barn door, the stall was empty. No mother, no infant, no signs of a struggle, no blood, no hair, nothing. Just gone. She stood in the doorway for a long time, listening. The barn was silent, cold, still. For the first time in days, it felt like a regular old barn again. She walked over to the corner where they had slept. The hay was flattened, the old blanket folded neatly. And then she saw it. A bundle of wild herbs, carefully tied together with twine, still fresh. Beside it, 2 smooth polished stones, dark and round like river rock, placed evenly, side by side. And a small mat of woven grass, not tangled, but braided in a clear, deliberate pattern, just inside the stall, right where Mum always stood to feed them. No note, no sound, just that. She stood there for several minutes, staring at it all. She didn't touch anything. She didn't need to. She knew what it meant. They were gone, but not without saying thank you. Mum never brought it up again, not to anyone. She went on with her life like always, fed the animals, paid the bills, went to church, kept the memory to herself. It wasn't until a year before she passed that I finally asked her. We were sitting on the porch, just the 2 of us. The sun was going down and she was quieter than usual. I asked her plain and direct, "Did it really happen?" She didn't hesitate, didn't smile, just looked me in the eye and said, "Every bit of it." Then she stood up, walked into the house, and came back with a small cardboard box. Inside was an old baby bottle, yellowed, cracked and worn. The rubber nipple was brittle, but it was still intact. "That's the one I used," she said. "You were too young to remember, but I saved it." That was all she said. She passed away the following spring. Years later, I drove out to the old farm. It had been sold off, but the barn was still there, though it was leaning heavy and half the roof had caved in. I stepped inside, walked to the back corner, and stood where they used to sleep. The hay was long gone, but I could still see the impression in the dirt. The faint shape of a body, and a smaller one curled beside it. As I turned to leave, something on the ledge caught my eye. A pine cone, bound with twine, fresh. No dust on it, no sign of weather. Just sitting there, like it had been placed not long ago. And in that moment, I stopped wondering.